Well, I started out as a co-pilot. My name is N.N. Gebhard. They call me Geb. And well, we're in the 389th Bomb Group. And I was a co-pilot. What else do we need on that?
Where were you before the war started, and what were you doing at the time?
Well, I spent a year in a CCC camp, and then I enlisted in the Air Force in June of 1941. And I went to armament school in Denver, and then I was sent to Mather Field in Sacramento, and I got there on Saturday afternoon before Pearl Harbor was bombed on Sunday. So they gave me a rifle and said, walk. And after that, I went to Las Vegas, McCarran Field, went through aerial gunnery school, and they kept me there as an instructor for a while. I didn't have any college, so I couldn't get into cadets until after they lowered the requirements to a high school education and a test, and I applied and I made it. So I went to Santa Ana for pre-flight, Ontario for primary, and then I went to Taft at Bakersfield for, what did they call it? I don't even know. It's hell to get old. But I graduated from Roswell, New Mexico as a pilot, and went to Utah for distribution, and then I joined the 389th Bomb Group in El Paso, and that was in March of '43.
How old were you when you entered the service?
I was 20.
And what city were you living in?
Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin. It's a little town, it's about halfway between Milwaukee and Green Bay, right on Lake Michigan.
How did you get overseas?
We flew the northern route, we picked up our new airplanes and flew them over. I flew with the Roy Braley crew in Sack Time Sally. We had a little bad luck. We took off from Bangor, Maine, and we lost an engine. And of course, we were loaded with a bunch of engineering equipment and extra people, and we had to land on a little dirt strip on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River. Well, they brought in a new engine and people to put it on, and then we'd stripped the airplane and left most of the crew there. They picked them up in the DC-3 and took them on. We had to take off around the corner to get enough airspeed to get that thing off of that dirt strip, but we finally made it to Hethel, the home of the 389th. We got there 2 weeks late, and they had already gone to Africa, to Benghazi, when we got there, but we joined them, and they were landing from their second mission when we got to Benghazi. We went on the third mission of the group with them.
What missions did you fly before the Ploesti mission?
Well, there were I think one was to, well, on the toe of Italy, Sardinia. And we went to Rome. Anyhow, Ploesti was my fourth mission.
When you were getting ready for the Ploesti mission, what do you remember about the practice missions and being told about the mission? What do you remember about that?
Well, the practice missions were just an excuse to buzz camels and Arabs, and we just had a pretty good time, really. And we were young. Shucks, you know, it was just another mission, really. They tried to explain to us how important it was, but as far as feeling different about that mission than anyone else, any other mission, it wasn't that bad. At least it wasn't to me.
When you were briefed that day, what do you remember about that briefing?
Well, of course, we didn't get briefed on that morning. We were just, everything was done, I think, the day before, the evening before. But the general says, you got to do this, and if you get back, fine, but if you don't and hit the target, that's fine too. You'll accomplish in, you know, several hours what it'll take divisions a long time to do. So he pumped us up.
What did your crew feel about that mission before they left?
Well, I say most of us were pretty young, and we knew it was important, and we were going to do the best we could. But other than that, I don't think anybody was scared any more than they would on any other mission.
What do you remember going from takeoff to the target area? What was going on?
It was just a nice, nice ride. We went over the Mediterranean and then went over those countries in Central Europe. It was just a nice ride. And we went over the mountains. And when we got on the other side of the mountains, of course, we let down and we flew pretty low. And it was just a nice, nice ride. No flak, no fighters, no nothing.
Can you describe what it was like to fly that low over the terrain and describe the terrain?
Well, the terrain varied, of course. We went over the mountains. We had to clear, I don't know, they were 10,000-foot mountains, I guess. We had to get over them. But when we got to the other side of the mountains, we got right down on the deck, hoping that we could miss the radar. But it was exhilarating. Getting that low, you could see what you were doing.
What squadron were you in at that time?
565th Squadron.
As your squadron was going in, when did you first start to encounter difficulty?
Well, of course, we made a bad turn, too. I guess everybody knows that. We turned down the wrong valley. I was flying left wing on the lead. And when he turned down this valley, I thought we were headed for the target, and we were flying pretty close. Well, when he got straightened out, he found out that it was the wrong valley and turned back in my face. And, of course, that was scary. So I had to climb for some altitude to get out of his way. But after that, they finally found the right valley, and we weren't hurt until we got right close to the target when we started getting small arms fire. And, of course, there were no fighters around at that time. They all came after we left the target.
As the small arms fire was hitting your squadron, what was the action like? What do you remember about that?
Well, we just had excuse me. We just had normal arrangement of guns, but I understand that the lead ship had 50 calibers that were firing forward, and they were hitting gun emplacements ahead of them. And our gunners, of course, were firing at anything that was around. But we were very fortunate. We didn't get hit at all. I think we had 2 small holes in our left wing when we got back, so we were pretty fortunate.
As you were approaching the bomb run and going into the target area, what do you remember? What did you see?
Well, of course, we had the target in sight, and we knew what it was going to look like. And being the co-pilot on the lead ship, I could look out and see what he was doing. I saw his bombs hit the ground, and he had the power plant as a target, and they hit the ground, just tumbled end over end right through the wall of the power plant. And immediately it started just steam and smoke and stuff, but no bombs went off, of course. They didn't go off until, I think we had 20-minute delay fuses, so they didn't go off for 20 minutes, but they went off, I understand, for 2 and 3 days. So, but I saw the bombs hit the ground first time.
When you turned to get out of the target area, what did you see?
Just people waving. I think they thought we were probably Russians or something. I don't know what they thought, but they were waving at us. And I don't think they felt bad about us being there, but maybe that was wrong. I don't know.
The bombs had not gone off at that time,
No.
so they were just waving
Yeah.
because they weren't worried about anything.
No, I don't guess they knew what we were doing there. But they just waved at us. They were all dressed up. It was a Sunday, and they were all in their pretty clothes.
As you were moving away from the target area and Did you see any of the bombs actually exploding or any?
No,
any
I
smoke?
didn't. No, I didn't see any. There were lots of smoke and fire, but they weren't from the bombs going off. Because we didn't stay there. We were the first ships over our target, so we turned and went. Our group bombed in 3 ship elements, so it took a little while for they crisscrossed the target from 3 different directions. And the last ships over had 45-second delay fuses, so by the time they started going off, we were quite a ways from that, and I didn't look back. We had turned to go home.
When you were over your when you were over the target, what was your altitude and what did you see? You know, you kind of had an idea what the target would look like. Describe the target for me and how high up.
Well, the smokestacks were 200 or 220 feet high, so we bombed between 250 and like 300 feet. And then after we dropped the bombs, we got down on the trees to get away from there.
Would that be about like 50 feet?
Oh, yeah. Or lower.
What,
Just missed the trees and bushes.
what kind of activity did you see on the ground during, you saw the bombs of the plane ahead of you tumble into the
Yeah.
power plant. What other activity did you see going on below you or around
Well,
you?
there were people shooting at us, of course. They had I understand they had haystacks that opened up. I didn't see all of this. Like I say, we were the first ships over the target, and a lot of things happened behind us that we didn't ever see. But they had pretty good defenses, I understand. We just happened to be lucky and didn't get involved with them.
As your group started to go back, how many planes were left in your group?
Well, most of us got through pretty good. I think we had 29 airplanes took off from Benghazi that morning. 29 went across the target, and we only lost 6, and 2 of those made it to Turkey. So we were very fortunate as a group. We didn't have all the problems that the other groups had over Ploesti proper.
On that long trip back, what was the reaction of the crew going back?
Well, we were glad that we had made it, and all we had to do now is sweat out fuel consumption, hope we can make it back to Africa.
What do you recall about the landing and then the debriefing afterward?
Well, the landing, it was very lonesome. There were a lot of people didn't make it back to our base. So, you know, there were just a few airplanes landing. And the debriefing, well, we told them what we had seen, and like I say, we were very fortunate. We didn't have a lot of problems, and we were very lucky.
Were you aware of it at the time, that the losses were heavy at the debriefing?
No. We didn't realize that. Well, we could see there was lots of fire and everything over at Ploesti itself. We turned short of Ploesti. Our target was several miles northwest of Ploesti, the city of Ploesti. And after we bombed, we turned before we got to Ploesti, so we could see that there was a lot of activity over there, but you know, we didn't know how bad it was until we got home.
What do you remember about your crew members' reaction the day after or around that time when they did learn about the losses?
Well, we just considered ourselves very fortunate that we were still there. Our group was very, very fortunate.
Did you go up soon after for other missions?
No. From reading books, they said there were only about 33 airplanes out of the original bunch that could make a combat mission. Everybody was shot to pieces, even the ones that made it back, so there were very few planes left to do anything. I think our next mission was to Wiener Neustadt in Austria, which was quite a week or so after the Ploesti mission.
How many planes left your base for that mission? Do you remember?
Well, there were 5 groups, and I think they said there were 178 airplanes total. And there were 5 bases in Africa. Ours was just a dirt strip they had scraped off and said, "Here's your home," because we just got there late. And there was 178 airplanes supposedly took off that morning, and they said that approximately 125 of them bombed effectively. In other words, got to the target and bombed the target. and they lost 54, and 4 more, I think, were scrapped, so they made a loss of about 58 airplanes.
As you recall the events of that time, do you think it was worth the risk going into Ploesti at that low level?
Well, like General Smart, who more or less planned the mission, as he said in a symposium that I attended, he said either we were going to have to do it at that altitude or not do it at all, because at high altitude it would take endless missions, and the losses would be too much that way. If everything had gone exactly as planned, this would have been one beautiful mission. But there were some problems, and it didn't work out exactly the way it planned it, but it was still a successful mission.
What have you heard about how did it happen that the mission went haywire?
Well, you hear all kinds of stories. I really don't know what happened, but the wrong turn, of course, that's what you hear about all the time. Instead of turning to Ploesti, they turned to Bucharest. And when they realized they were heading in the wrong direction, they turned back to Ploesti. And the other people coming in correctly, they were just running through each other, I understand. So it was a pretty bad mess. But they still bombed and wiped out a bunch of distilling facilities.
Do you recall any other significant mission that sticks in your mind that you went on?
Well, the second Wiener Neustadt mission, south of Austria, they shot us all to pieces on that one. And then we went to Ludwigshaven in January of '44, and for some reason the lead ship was off course and took us south of Paris after we dropped the bombs, instead of going north of Paris with a bomber stream. And they got to understand it was Hermann Göring's outfit that came up there and dealt us a lot of misery. I was flying deputy lead on that one, and the first pass through they got the lead ship, so that stuck me out in front, and they worked on me, but they missed, so I made it.
Were the missions over Europe, in your mind, more deadly than the mission to Ploesti?
Probably not more deadly, but we accomplished more on that low-level mission than you could do with the high-level bombing. We didn't always hit our targets on the high level, but you couldn't miss at this altitude where we were flying at Ploesti. We were right on top of the target. You couldn't miss. But of course, you couldn't do that over Europe. I mean, in Germany, they would have been disasters. So they had to go high altitude.
What did you do after the war when you left the service?
I married. I went back to Wisconsin, and I just worked several different jobs, and finally came back to Fort Worth, and I went to work for General Dynamics and in quality assurance, and I retired after 35 years at General Dynamics.
I forgot to ask you, what planes did you fly during the war, and what plane, the name of the plane you flew on Ploesti?
Sack Time Sally was the name of the airplane that we flew to Ploesti, and after Ploesti, the lead ship, the lead pilot wanted me in as his co-pilot, so I don't know why, but anyhow, I ended up as his co-pilot, Kenneth Caldwell. And I flew with him for several missions, and then he went into operations, and I took his crew as the first pilot.
Names of any other planes that you remember you flew on?
Well, Sack Time Sally was the first one, and Scorpion was the name of the lead ship on Ploesti, and that's the ship I took over. And we went back to Tunis after we went back to England from the Ploesti mission. We went back to Tunis and helped the Fifth Army, which was catching hell around Salerno, They were landing on the toe of Italy, and we were bombing supply routes. And we bombed Pisa, and they got my gas tanks full of holes, so I didn't have enough gas to get back to Africa. So we landed in Sardinia, right about in the middle of the island. Of course, Sardinia is just west of Italy. And I landed in kind of a dry lake bed, and then we burned the airplane because the Germans were supposed to be in there. Well, the Germans had moved from that area of the island to the northern part of the island, and they were evacuating Sardinia into Italy. But we burned the airplane, and we finally got a ride back to Africa with a B-25 that came over and picked us up. But that was Scorpion. We burned that one. Got to keep General Dynamics in business. And after that, I got a new airplane and went to London. Excuse me. I went to London on a pass and came back, and somebody else had been shot down, and we never did even name it. And then I finally got another new one, and we named it Blunderbuss. And that's the last airplane I had. My last mission, I flew in an old D model. This Blunderbuss was a H or a J, I don't remember. But they had the turret in the nose, so on a leading a mission, you had to have room for the bombardier and navigator to see. So we flew an old D model on that last mission.
How did the war change you?
Well, it just took a hunk out of your life is about it. But it was very educational. And I wouldn't take anything for it, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
What is the moment during the war, whether it's at Ploesti or any time else, that stands out most in your mind as you look back?
Dangerous, you mean?
Any moment.
Well, that mission to Ludwigshaven when Caldwell was killed, that was scary. Because I'd look, of course, that stuck me in the lead, and I had used automatic pilot. I'd look out and I'd see them come in. They just line up abreast, 10 of them at a whack, and you'd see their wings turn red, and you knew there was lead coming. So I'd get interested in that automatic pilot. I didn't have time to look at them. They scared me. But that was a pretty harrowing mission. I think we lost 4. They just missed me. But they hit Caldwell. I think they hit Caldwell with a rocket, because the last I saw of him, the whole cockpit was afire. And so they just disappeared. And I don't think anybody got out of that one.
What's your most significant memory of the Ploesti mission?
Getting home. It was a long ride. I think it was almost 14 hours long. But as long as you weren't under fighter attack, you were just up there. And the fighters, we weren't bothered that much with the fighters. Actually, our group was very, very fortunate. We lucked out.
What do you want the world and history to remember about your contribution to the war effort?
Well, that we tried to make the world a little better. We had to stop Adolph. If he'd have listened to his generals and admirals, we might still be fighting him. But he was a dumb corporal. He knew more about fighting a war than the good ones that knew how to fight war. So, but we had a terrible time. If we didn't have England to fly from, we wouldn't have had a base. That was just a floating airfield.
Is there anything else you want to tell us that we might not have asked you about your war experience?
Well, no, that covers it pretty well.